There's a question deep inside. Will you guide me through the night? Will you calm the storms of my life? All these walls are built to comfortable, and the world outside is loud. When the voice I trust is fear and doubt, I don't need your guidance now. All my walls and my defenses fall to the ground. When the warmth of your light shines all around, your love is better than all the world can give. Your love is better than all the world can give. Will you save me from this emptiness? Will you lead me into peace? Will you save me from this loneliness? Will you hold my fears release? All my walls and my defenses fall to the ground. When the warmth of your light shines all around, oh, your love is better than all the world can give. Your love is better than all the world can give. Your love is better than all the world can give. Your love is better than all the world can Good morning. Welcome to Watershed, our online virtual church experience here today. We are so glad that you're here and that you're joining us. And we want to welcome you in and give you a few minutes to log in, to share this stream so that your friends and your Facebook world can hear and join us. And I want to hear where you're logging in from, where you are currently located. I know it's beginning to warm up and the sun is out and we've had a nice week of weather. So maybe you are outside this morning. We'd love to know if you are checking in from outside and soaking up some of the sun. And we're going to sing a song here in a few minutes that we've done before, but the name of the song is Morning Song, and it talks a lot about hope. And so this morning, as you're checking in and starting to settle into watching the stream, I'd love to hear from you. Like, what is giving you hope these days? I know that different people are starting to get the vaccine, and it's becoming available to more and more. And I know for me, that is bringing about a lot of hope. I know it doesn't mean that this is over. It doesn't mean that we don't need to have precautions in place, but there's a sense that there's hope, that there's more kind of coming around the bend. We were talking this morning, and Tony was saying, he's starting to get calls, and I've seen that bands are starting to post about festivals coming in the summer and this fall, and it has been a long time since I've seen like a big show with a lot of people, and I know that we're still probably far away from that, but that's something that's giving me hope and joy and something to look forward to, and so we're excited about that, and we'd love to hear from you. What's going on in your world? What's bringing you hope right now? As we sing this next song, take some time and, you can write in the comments, what's bringing you hope. And a part of our hope is that this morning would give you a little sense of that, a little space for you to smile, to take a deep breath, to center yourself and recharge. Turns to morning, you have been waiting, whispering to me, gently I'm waking, it's the dawn of a new day, you've painted for me, colors exploding, telling our story. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. Night turns to morning, you have been waiting, whispering to me, gently I'm waking, it's the dawn of a new day, you've painted for me, colors exploding, telling our story. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. Waking up, I'm waking up. Oh, I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy sings me the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy sings me the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. I can feel the rising of Mercy sings me the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. My heart is beating for. My heart is beating for. My heart is beating for. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I'm waking up, I'm waking up. Oh, I'm waking up, I'm waking up. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy sings me the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart's beating for. I can feel the rising of the sun. Mercy sings me the promise of your love. I'm reminded of how far we've come. You're the one that my heart is beating for. Blessed are the ones who do not bury all the broken pieces of their heart. Blessed are the tears of all the weary, pouring like a sky of falling stars. Blessed are the wounded ones in mourning, brave enough to show the Lord their scars. Blessed are the hurts that are not hidden, open to the healing touch of God. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him.
Blessed are the ones who walk in kindness, even in the face of great abuse. Oh, blessed are the deeds that go unnoticed, serving with unguarded gratitude. Blessed are the ones who fight for justice, longing for the coming day of peace. Blessed is the soul that thirsts for righteousness, welcoming the last, the lost, the least. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Our hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes
Blessed are the ones who suffer violence and still have strength to love their enemies. Blessed is the faith of those who persevere. Though they fall, they never know defeat. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Our hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Our hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Our hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Our hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him.
Did you all see that? I almost tripped. Well, good morning, Watershed. What is going on is the question that you are probably asking me and that I am here to answer. For those who don't know me, my name is David Roberts, one of the pastors here on staff at Watershed, and I would like to just take a few minutes out of your time together with us this morning to get you up to speed on what is, in fact, going on here at Watershed. First and foremost, however, what is not going on this evening is our student experience. We've been on for the last 3 weeks. We just wrapped up a discussion series about race, equity, and justice. It was phenomenal. And we're going to take this week off. We're going to be back next week, 7 p.m. on Zoom, to kick off our next discussion series as voted by the students about climate change and other existential threats. So yeah, cheery group we have. But it's going to be awesome. We have a great time on Sunday evenings. We talk deep, talk serious, and then we play some games and things like that. So we will be back next week on Zoom, 7 p.m. Watershed-Charlotte.com/watershed-students is how you stay kind of up to date with the schedule for our Zoom meetings. And of course, you can always follow the Watershed student accounts on Facebook and Instagram, because we update there as well. As far as our children go, our greenhouse space, we are putting some feelers out for an event in 2 weeks on March 21st. This will be an in-person, here on the Watershed campus, Easter egg hunt. This would be from 11 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. The target ages would be 2 to 12, although entire families are, of course, invited. And we would very much still be following CDC guidelines as far as masks and distancing and things like that. But right now, we're tentatively planning on doing this, but we're gauging interest. And so if anything I just described, Easter egg hunt, here at Watershed, seeing people distanced safely outdoors, if that is appealing to you, if that sounds like something your kids would enjoy and you would be comfortable with them participating, there's going to be a link in the comments. We really need to know if people are interested in this or not. because if not, we'll pivot. But if yes, kind of full steam ahead, moving forward to make sure that this event is both safe and fun. So please, if you have any questions as well, just by signing up and expressing interest in the event, by filling out the link, you will get more information about what we're hoping it will look like this week. So please, 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 if you're a family with kids in that age range, we would love to hear from you regarding this event in 2 weeks. Next, we have a number of ways to be getting plugged in here at Watershed, but the best way by far is our preface experience. Under normal circumstances, non-pandemic circumstances, it's a 5 to 6 week in-person experience. But due to the pandemic, we are fully digital with a 3-week preface experience. We just wrapped up the most recent preface. It was awesome. I had the chance to spend some time with this new group, meet a few of them in person, outdoors, at an event last weekend, and preface fills up fast. So if you are interested in hearing a little bit more about Watershed's own journey and exploring whether or not your journey might intersect with Watershed's, then preface is for you. It's going to be, I believe, I want to say on Wednesdays in April. It's going to start on April 14th and then be the next 2 Wednesdays, so the 21st and the 28th after that. And the signups are open. There should be a link to express interest in preface in the comments. So please, please, please. It's going to be primarily led by our co-pastors, Matt O'Neill and Scott Hofert. I'll probably make some cameo appearances, as with some of our other staff. But it's just a great opportunity to kind of dig into what's going on here at Watershed and discern your next steps. And if you just finished preface, or perhaps have done preface in the past, or maybe you haven't and you're still looking for other ways to get plugged in, one of the best next steps, selfishly, in my opinion, since I lead this, is the reclamation block. And our very next reclamation block, which is going to be a 4-week experience on Zoom, kicks off this Tuesday at 7 p.m. It's basically full, but if you really want to join us, I'd be happy to have you. We still have room a little bit. And we are going to be doing the not ambitious at all. We're going to be exploring what it looks like to sort of reclaim or explore how we understand what it means to be Christian. We're going to be reclaiming Christianity, like I said. Not ambitious at all. Basically, if you're not familiar with what reclamation is, I kind of lead a group through the exploration of some idea, some doctrine, kind of theological belief or approach to Scripture or theology in some sense that maybe made sense in one way for many of us growing up, perhaps coming out of a version of Christianity that no longer lives for us anymore. And we explore what it might look like to translate or redefine or reclaim it for our own present faith and spiritual journey now. And so rather than start with the small stuff, we're just going to do the whole shebang. We're gonna attempt to reclaim Christianity over the next 4 weeks, starting this Tuesday. So this is totally free. It's going to be Tuesdays at 7 p.m. on Zoom. There should be a link in the comments to sign up. Like I said, a couple spaces left, but we would absolutely, absolutely love to see you. And then just a reminder, kind of before I end my time with you this morning, stick around after the message, which is going to kick off in a few minutes here. There's going to be another song, and then there's going to be another announcement video at the very end. And lastly, before I turn things back over to our incredible band, I just want to thank you, as we always do, those of you who continue to support Watershed financially through your giving and through your resources. We very much feel like we're kind of in this kind of weird liminal space, this in-between period, where we're still leaning in to this digital expression of what Watershed is, still exploring ways to actually, kind of bridge the gaps that many of us are experiencing communally through Zoom and maybe through some outdoor things that we're going to start experimenting with in the coming weeks, and trying to make that sustainable and meaningful, while at the same time we have our eyes on, this hopeful prospect that in the coming weeks, more likely actually, if we're being honest, the coming months, we might be able to experiment with safely meeting together in some form in person as well. And it's probably going to be a hybrid of some sort for a while, but regardless of how that ends up looking, none of this is, nor would it have been, nor will it be possible without the ongoing generosity of all of you. And so thank you for those of you who continue to give. Thank you for those who not only give consistently, but have kind of stepped up from time to time with a one-time extra gift. Little things like that have been keeping us going during this tumultuous last 12 months. And we have a lot of different programs to make things safe and accessible. All of that can be found on our website. There'll be a link, answering any questions you might have about where the money's going, how it's being stewarded, and also some cool information about ways to do like donor matching and things like that, perhaps through your place of employment. So all that said, thank you, all of you, for the ways that you continue to pour in and invest in the work we are doing here at Watershed. That is all for me. It's wonderful to see you in the form of this camera that I'm staring at. Hopefully wonderful for you to see me, and hopefully I will see some of you this Tuesday at Reclamation. Take care.
Hello, my name is Valerie, and I've been part of Watershed for 2 years now. I was elated to find Watershed. If you come here, you know, and if you're new here, we need more places like Watershed. I feel like it embodies all the things, and it just really allows an individual to come as they are and be loved on, and allows for a listening heart and for an individual to just truly be who they are. Since coming here, I've been a part of Preface, which has allowed me to know that this is a place that I want to plant some roots. I was given the opportunity to help out with Shed Village, and that was a blessing in my life at that time. I'm super nervous, if you can't tell. I was asked to take part in what's saving me now, and for me, it's creativity. Creativity kind of allows me to, or being creative allows me to kind of let go of the day's stressors and set them aside and kind of just be. And whether it's putting on some music and drinking a glass of wine and cooking dinner in the simplest of form, or usually comedy, which involves one of my children, and realizing that life doesn't have to be taken so seriously. Because I think we all know that with life's ups, you know, we have to brace for the downs and hold on during twists and turns. I also like to create with clay or write, and I wrote this a while ago, but I wanted to share it. Growing, she's tending to her mind. Her fear torn down brick by brick, but it will still take some time. Learning that doing the best she can is good enough, because putting her faith in others and her baggage has left her faithless and ravaged. Inherently searching, she has found shimmers of greatness. Growing, she is tending to her mind. Oh, behold the treasure she will find. Right now, we would like to give you the space and time to reflect on how God and the divine might be showing up in the cracks and details of your daily life.
This morning we're starting a new series, A Different World is Possible, and you've seen the graphic flash a few times. And the song that we're about to sing, we did back when we were in the Cabin Fever Church series, and there's this line in it that gives us a sense that things are changing. And this song was written years and years and years ago, and still rings true. There's something that we experience here at Watershed that gives us a sense that change is happening and will continue to happen, and that a new world is possible, not just in the future, but today. And so we're going to talk about that today, but I want to share this song with you again and let you sit with this idea.
Come gather around, people, wherever you roam, and admit that the waters around you have grown, and accept it that soon you'll be drenched to the bone. If your time to you is worth saving, and you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, for the times they are a-changing. Come writers and critics who prophesize with your pen, and keep your eyes wide, the chance won't come again. And don't speak too soon, for the wheel's still in spin, and there's no telling who that it's naming. For the loser now will be later to win, for the times they are a-changing. The times they are a-changing.
Come senators, congressmen, please heed the call. Don't stand in the doorway, don't block up the hall. For he that gets hurt will be he who has stalled. There's a battle outside and it's raging. It'll soon shake your windows and rattle your walls, for the times they are a-changing. The times they are a-changing. The times they are a-changing. Come mothers and fathers throughout the land, and don't criticize what you can't understand. Your sons and your daughters are beyond your command. Your old road is rapidly aging. Please get out of the new one if you can't lend a hand, for the times they are changing. The line it is drawn and the curse it is cast. A slow one now will later be fast, as the present now will later be past. The order times they are a-changin'.
This a K-drama beat.
Hey, Watershed, good morning. It's just, you cannot watch that without smiling, right? I'm so excited about the start of this series. I guess it was in 1988, I was a junior. That's right, a junior at the University of Kentucky. But I would often go home to spend time with my family and some of my high school friends. And some of my buddies, their dads were really into big-time wrestling back in the 80s. More specifically, one of my friend's fathers followed this wrestler by the name of Roddy Piper, who probably most of you have never heard of, unless, of course, you grew up in North Carolina and watched Ric Flair, because I think the two would square off pretty frequently. But I wasn't really into the wrestling thing, which I know is shocking, right? I wasn't into the wrestling thing, but in 1988, there was a film by John Carpenter called They Live, and Roddy got cast as the main character, this guy by the name of John Nada. And John Nada was sort of this, I guess, sort of wayward traveling type of character that ended up in a construction job in this particular city. And one day after work, as he was walking home, he kind of ran across this street preacher on a corner, and the two became friends. They started to talk, and this street preacher introduced him to this, I guess, sort of underworld movement of people that were getting ready to revolt against these alien creatures that were that had infiltrated humanity and were going to attempt to destroy the world and make the planet their own, which isn't necessarily a new idea in terms of science fiction, isn't it? But the way that you could see these creatures is you had to have these special glasses. And so Roddy's character, John, had this friend named Frank, who was also a construction worker. And one day when they were walking home, he was determined for Frank to put these glasses on so that he could see the world that he was observing. And they end up having this epic street fight. It's like 6 minutes long. It's cinematic history, some would argue. And at some point, John, Piper's character, subdues Frank, makes him put the glasses on, and boom, there it is. The world that Piper had been describing, all these really horrific-looking alien creatures and these flying saucers that were scrambling everybody's brain to suggest that, these creatures were actually normal, who were intermingling within humanity and sort of doing this mind trick, telling humanity what to do. And of course, the rest of the movie is about the two of them undertaking this mass revolt and eventually saving the planet. I'm sorry if that's a spoiler. I know most of you are going to literally go to the link that's in the comment section and watch this afternoon. Let me save you some time and trouble. They end up saving the planet. There is a twist at the end if you're interested. But a couple of weeks ago, I was with a friend of mine, and we started to talk a little bit about what it's been like over the last year to 4 years. And they began to describe how divisive the world was today, and sort of like this shock and awe of the things that were that we could observe today. Things like racism and sexism and misogyny. And they made this statement. They said, I just thought we had moved past all of this. And it made me think of this movie and how shocking it is when something is revealed that has been hidden in plain sight, whether you could see it or not. I guess it was literally a year ago. No, it was. It was a year ago, I think maybe this Sunday, where we unveiled these words to our community. Watershed is a community awakening, struggling, and loving together as though a different world is possible today. I just remember there being quite a bit of excitement and fulfillment around actually being able to have language to describe who we were and what we were hoping to become. But I think, here it is a year later, and given what we've gone through, only now are we really beginning to grapple fully with specific endeavors that I think are going to be necessary. We think that are going to be necessary in terms of what it means to hold a capacity of love that actually allows a different world to emerge. And I would surmise that these endeavors are not just endeavors that are unique to Watershed, but I think these are actually the endeavors that Jesus embodied and modeled 2,000 years ago. So, for instance, I think Jesus embodied the endeavor to understand the world where he lived, right? Like, once there was a wealthy landowner. Once there was a rich young ruler. Once there was a woman who had been bleeding for 12 years. Once there was a man possessed by demons. Once there was a tax collector, a Samaritan, a man who was blind, a man who was deaf, a man who had leprosy. I grew up in a religious past, and maybe this resonates with you, but every time the scriptures were handed to me and the words and the actions of Jesus were handed to me, I was told that this is something personal for me, and that somehow this had something to do with me escaping sin and getting into heaven. But when you can divorce yourself from the need of Scripture to point in that direction, and you can begin to zoom the lens out, there's actually a different pair of glasses that you start to wear that allows you to see something different. And in the world where Jesus lived, there was this great divide between wealth and power and those who did not have wealth and power. There was this huge canyon between the haves and the have-nots, for lack of a better term. And what were their lives like? And what did the world look like where they lived? Well, sometimes it looked like a soldier whose daughter had just died, a father whose son squandered his inheritance, a woman who had been caught in an adultery, a friend who was unable to walk, a crowd of people who were hungry. The world looked like a group of workers who were eager to work but no jobs, or farmers whose tax bill were too much for them to pay. And you can say what you want, but it's near impossible to look at Jesus, to look at his friends and the stories that he told or the conversations that he engaged and not acknowledge that he's talking about particular scenarios that actually existed in that day and age, whether it was metaphor or real. Namely, stories about the way things really were for the people of his day, those suffering and dying at the hands of greed and exploitation. And he's saying, look, the world is divided, and there's a dominant narrative that continues to go unchallenged. And this is the call of who we are and as followers of God, he suggests, that the narrative is challenged. Because this narrative, this unchallenged narrative, impacts beyond the margins of the normal that was created by the people in charge. I think Jesus endeavored to understand and name the world where he lived. I think that's our endeavor as well. I think Jesus also endeavored to describe the type of world that he wished, or in our context, that we wish existed. He called it God's world, or the kingdom of heaven, or the kingdom of God, because those were the structural ways people existed back in those days. And if we were to reflect back on each story from the reference that I just read in kind of this machine gun fashion, Jesus almost always circles back, and after naming the reality, says, but this is what the new world could begin to look like. And we don't have time to go through every reference that I mentioned, but at the beginning of Jesus' infamous Sermon on the Mount, he begins by listing something called the Beatitudes, these attitudes or dispositions. And maybe you're familiar with this story, or you're familiar with this part of Jesus' sermon, but I'm going to paraphrase here, but Matthew writes, blessed, Jesus says, blessed are the poor in the spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are those who are meek. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for justice, the merciful, the pure in heart. Blessed are the peacemakers, those who are persecuted for the sake of justice, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. It's interesting, in the world of imperialism, in the world of occupation, who really gets blessed? Right? Like, who really are the rewarded in those types of world? In a world of religious dogma, in the world of religious political maneuvering to protect one's own self-interest, who really gets rewarded? It's not the people that Jesus is talking to in this sermon, people who are lined by the hundreds, maybe even the thousands on hillsides. And it's not the people who exhibit the attributes that he's just described. In Jesus' world, people who actually lived antithetical to those attributes are the ones who had enough food, who had enough shelter, who had enough resources and money, who had enough representation, enough support. Those were the ones who were observably, to the naked eye, being blessed. And so there's quite a bit of hyperbole taking place when Jesus launches these words, because the people that he's naming right now, they're typically never celebrated. They were never taken seriously. That's who he's pointing to. But in doing so, he's actually painting a different world, what it could look like. This is what it should be like. In my Father's world, in the one that we get to create together, those of you who are meek, who are peacemakers, who are pure in heart, those of you who are hungry and thirsty for justice and righteousness in my Father's kingdom, this is the way that reality should actually work. And so this is an upside down world that we have to turn right side up. And will you join me? Endeavoring to understand, endeavoring to describe. And then I think the last thing that we have to be endeavoring towards is endeavoring to reorder and reorganize. Leave your nets behind, Jesus says. Get in a boat. Step out of the boat. Cross a lake. Walk up a mountain. Pray in a garden. Sow a seed. Love a stranger. Become like a child. Forgive your enemy. Lay down your life for a friend. Trust like the birds of the air and the flowers of the field. And again, these aren't measurables in the quest to be like Jesus so much, or measurables in what it means to be found favorable by God. When Jesus calls someone not to worry, not to be afraid, stop busying themselves with the things that do not matter. When he says, remove the plank from your eye, give both the coat and the undergarment off of your back, walk an extra mile, turn the other cheek. When he invites someone to come down from a tree, to abide in his words, to have faith the size of a mustard seed, to give, to sacrifice, to put down their sword. These are not spiritual hoops that we are to jump through as a way of entertaining a God that already loves us and accepts us. Instead, these are ways of reordering. These are literal things, literal behaviors in one's life in the service of creating the world that Jesus dreamed of in his age and his day. A world that Jesus insisted and believed was possible, to the extent that he was willing to give his own life. And the question is, do we believe? Do we even believe it's possible? Even if we did, where would we begin? In the book of Hebrews, in chapter 13, the author of Hebrews writes, let us go to him, Jesus, therefore, outside the camp and be willing to share in his degradation. And it's interesting, this statement is situated within a larger conversation around the tradition of like holy offerings and priests offering blood sacrifices in the temple of that day in Jerusalem. It's where the author spends quite a bit of time reminding Jewish Christians that she is writing to. I'm going to say she because there's a lot of scholarship that suggests that Priscilla, one of Paul's disciples actually wrote this piece, but reminds Christians in the midst of national discourse, this was always traditionally the way that Israel leaned towards hearing from God. It was in the temple. But then, like almost in a 180, almost reminiscent of Paul dismantling circumcision, or Peter dismantling dietary codes, the author suggests that if you really want to hear God, you have to move outside of the camp. By the way, in Exodus 33, the writers of Exodus recalls a time when, quote, Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, at some distance from the camp. Anyone who wants to consult Yahweh would go to this tent of meeting outside the camp. And so this wasn't a new idea, right? It would appear that there were times in Israel's history where they recognized that to hear God meant literally changing your proximity. In other words, there were times that in order to see what was real, you had to reorganize, or recognize rather, that to hear God meant you were to relocate yourself outside the agreed upon normal, the status quo. And in the case of Moses, it was outside the camp because there was no city, and the tent, the temple was actually this makeshift tent. But for first century Christians, there wasn't a camp, right? There was only a city, namely the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is where the temple existed. It's also where Israel's leaders, was the center of gravity of Israel's leaders being abusive in their power and their exploitation over their own people. Remember, the temple is where Jesus turned over the tables, right? For these same reasons. Jerusalem was also under Roman occupation. Jerusalem and the temple is where Israel's leaders literally conspired with Roman's Jewish king, King Herod, to silence Jesus, to kill Jesus, to bring Jesus' followers into submission and squelch an uprising, to squelch the narrative. And so if you're trying to understand the way the world really works, or you're trying to dream of a different world, how hard would it be to get an accurate picture of reality from within a normalized world of power and greed, created by the people who were in charge, the people who controlled the narrative? How hard would this be? It would be impossible. Let us go outside the city, outside the camp, outside the temple. Let us be willing to share in his degradation. In other words, let us move into a place of solidarity with suffering, with the oppressed, with the pain and the toil of our neighbors. Just maybe we would begin to understand what's real. And at that point, begin to dream differently of a new world. Which brings me back to today, the first week of this series. I think this has to be the trajectory of this community. I think we have to be mindfully continuing to locate ourselves outside of the camp, outside the dominant narratives of wealth and power and prestige. And so what does it mean then? Like to attempt to do this with all of its awkwardness and all of its messiness, and to do this and live with all of its intersections, right? What does it mean to do this, and to do this with unity? As a predominantly, historically white, straight, middle to upper class watershed community, to move to the outside of the camp, I think there's a couple of maybe first words that might be helpful as we begin to do this together. And I say first words because there's so many words, right, that I think are necessary here. But here's the first sort of words that I would offer this morning, and it's the words of listening long before speaking. Listening long before speaking. I was with someone recently who shared with me my same race, my same gender, presumably probably my same sexual orientation. And we were checking in with each other because this person who's been around for almost a decade had started to feel unsafe here. And they verbalized this distrust in themselves a bit. Like, I don't trust my beliefs politically, economically, socially, or theologically moving forward are going to be taken as seriously or even welcomed here at Watershed on equal ground. And this is not something I'm used to. Watershed has always been very open, and so this is very disruptive. And by the way, if the language that I just sort of evacuated there, I just named, that's how you feel sometimes here. Can I first say that, all right, me too? I've been a part of this for 15 years, and I go through seasons of feeling that. But I think it's also important to acknowledge, and I did this with my friend. I said, look, I understand. It makes all the sense in the world how the past year to 3 years could feel like really fast and really dramatic in terms of the changes that we've moved through. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that, first of all, it's not like this has been finessed without mistakes. There's been times where I think we could have done a better job around this, that, or the other thing. But it's also irrational to think that somehow when there's major changes taking place within a community or an organization, that inadvertently someone might not get hurt or upset. That's just what happens every time we've ever changed here at Watershed. We've had to work through this with folks. But earlier in this pandemic, as we started to see black men and women being brutalized and killed at the hands of law enforcement, we realized this was a watershed moment. Either we are going to mean what we've said mean what we say, when we've said we're in solidarity, or not. And it wasn't even open for discussion. We're going to stand in solidarity. When it comes to understanding the way the world actually works, who are we going to listen to? When it comes to try to re-envision the world and what it could be, who are we going to trust help us to do this? Are we going to stay in the camp? Or are we going to move outside the city? Are we going to move to the outer edges of the inside? I began to tell my friend these stories. I told my friend that there's been times over the last year that we've heard from our community of color. They've told us, I'm scared. What if I don't make it home alive this week? Will you tell the Watershed community how terrifying it is for me or for us? Will you let them know that my whole life I've had to live with this type of fear? And you see, when someone inside the camp says, I deserve to be heard, when someone insists my ideas are equally valid, but they're still in the camp, when there's been no shift in proximity, no willingness or opportunity to listen or to hear the underrepresented voices and stories, those who exist just beyond the boundaries of normalized narratives. Well, it's irrational to think that someone inside the camp can accurately define the reality. This is why these conversations are so difficult, right? For someone, especially like me, who is white and straight, who's a male, it's just hard. When there's a narrative that you've been swimming in your whole life, you didn't realize it, and then it gets challenged, and you realize you've been validated through that narrative for most of your life as well. It can feel like the earth is literally crumbling underneath your feet. And so this is the conversation I had with my friend. And it was really fascinating. He said, those stories are the most helpful thing that you've said today, which was really encouraging. It felt like, all right, this is enough, at least for this day, for the relationship to keep going. Because I told this person, I said, look, we both want the same thing. We both want you and others who struggle like you and like me to be here in this community. But my experience over the past several years has been that long before it's helpful for anyone, including myself, to assume I have a clear view of reality proportionate to everyone else. It's uber important that we spend enormous amounts of time in proximity to and listening to people whose voices have been disproportionately ignored and silenced, snuffed out. Listening long before we speak. And then finally this. Loretta Ross, Dr. Loretta Ross is the creator of something called the Dread Feminist Podcast. And for decades, Dr. Ross has worked in reproductive justice as a champion for human rights and activism. And in the name of being fully transparent, I only recently discovered her work through an NPR article entitled Calling In, Calling Out Culture. This article it shares the title of an anti-racism course that she leads, and it's really becoming pretty well known. I'm actually going to, in the comment section, I'm putting a couple of different articles in case you want to kind of hear more about who she is and the work that she does. I found it fascinating and really informative. I would encourage you to check out some of what she does. But in one of her pieces that I read, she was naming how difficult it is to engage friends and loved ones who continue to refute a reality that doesn't reinforce the experience that they have within the status quo of their life. And she talks about noticing a type of harshness or public shaming that often awaits a person who is genuinely wanting to participate in social justice, in what it means to create a different world, but they're still really early maybe in their curiosity or their information or their willingness to see anything other than what they've always seen or experienced. And she said something in this article that I thought, oh my gosh, like this is so where we need to be as a community. She said, we have to be willing to create spaces where people who are trying to defect can be loved. And she went on to say, a movement towards justice has to create this sort of space, or it will die. Again, I know there's a whole lot more to be said around this sort of thing. This is just the first word. But in his book, Love is the Way, Holding on to Hope in Troubled or Troubling Times, Bishop Michael Curry describes navigating these sorts of dynamics within community and within relationships throughout his life. And he sort of launches this metaphor of standing and kneeling at the same time. Standing and kneeling at the same time. And according to Curry, to kneel is to acknowledge that individually and collectively, we need to be reminded that we are not God. We're not. To kneel is to surrender to that truth. It's surrender to our powerlessness to change someone's mind and heart who has no interest in change whatsoever. To kneel is to recognize that someone else has as much right to a perspective as we do ours. To kneel is to remind ourselves that there have been times when we too have been misaligned with some sense of truth, justice, or love. And so we have to kneel, he said. But we also have to stand. We have to stand with and for those who are on the margins, who are outside the camp or outside the city. And we also have to stand for what we believe and humbly trust it's the right thing. And he says this, if we do this, or when this happens, it doesn't change everybody's mind. But it does create a different atmosphere. And atmosphere does make a difference, especially in the long haul, which is what I want to sign up for, right? This isn't a microwave experience. This is a crock pot. And the way we show up for each other in this space and in this world is only going to grow in its importance. As days unfold and as the world continues to move towards a new normal, as we begin to gather, the last thing we want to do as a church is stop standing. But we also don't want to drift backwards into dogmatic atmospheres reminiscent of past religious expressions from which many, if not all of us, have migrated from, right? And by the way, on a personal note, over the last 15 years, and I would argue more recently, whatever transformation that I've experienced, and I think whatever shifts that Watershed has experienced, when I begin to reflect back, it's people who lived outside the inner edge of the camp who somehow embodied this standing and kneeling idea for me in my life. And they didn't have to, and I didn't deserve that. But that's how they showed up. Yeah, we know you're going to screw it up, Matt, but we still love you. And that grace, that love, that atmosphere might be the single greatest agent of change that this community has experienced in its short-lived life. We have to listen long before we speak. It's crucial that we learn how to stand and kneel at the same time. If Watershed truly is going to be a community, awakening, struggling, but also loving together as though a different world is possible today. So God, this morning as we endeavor to dream, as we endeavor to name reality and to adjust, as we fight against the current and move towards the outside of the camp, may we grow in our capacity to love in a way that both stands in solidarity with those who suffer, but also kneels as you work and as you move in our hearts and in the hearts of those who are drawn in the same direction. May we create space, and may it be a type of space that is scandalous in the way we love, such that our lives are never the same and that the world is different today, in this day. And it's in Christ's name that we pray. Amen.
Come all proud, come all greedy, come all liars, come all shamed, come all wealthy, come receive. To the table, come today. Come all broken, come all needy, come all poor, and come all slaves. Come all rulers, come be seated. Come all sinners, come all saints. Come to the table, from near and far. Come from the shadows, come out of the dark. There's room at the table. We saved you a seat. Come to the banquet. Come join in the feast. Every race, every nation. Come all rebels, come all gay. To the table, come be seated. To the table, come and stay. To the table, come and stay. Come to the table. Come eat and drink. There's no inner circle. Come dine with the King and recline at the table. Come down your guard. You're never a stranger. Just come as you are. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Oh, come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. And come now, come. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Prepared is the table. We're ready to feast. The party is waiting. There's more still to feed. The harvest is ready. Go fill every seed. Go live out the mission as kingdom of priests. And go live out the mission as kingdom of priests. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Come be whole. Come be loved. Come accepted. Come now, come. Come now, come. Oh, come now, come.
What's up, Watershed? David Roberts here, along with Matt O'Neill, and this is another edition of Theological Thursdays at Watershed. If you're not familiar with Theological Thursdays, what we try to do is every week do a kind of a deeper dive into something that either stood out or maybe there was questions about in the talk or the message or the sermon from the previous Sunday. What we're doing today, though, is a little different because we are about to kick off a brand new teaching series this Sunday called A Different World is Possible. And the reason Matt's here is because in many ways this was kind of his brainchild, very collaborative effort kind of in our teaching series planning and whatnot. But Matt was the one who kind of brought this to our group, so I roped him in to join me today. So real quick, Matt, tell us a little bit about this upcoming series.
Well, I think there was a dominant framing narrative that existed in the first century when Jesus was trying to announce a different type of kingdom within that particular time frame. And the kingdom that Jesus was announcing was a challenge to the normed narrative of his day. And so before he could begin to to kind of bring people along on the journey of what does it look like for the world to be different in the first century. He had to challenge that narrative. He had to figure out what it meant to live differently in the world as that narrative was being challenged. We're going to kind of take a play out of that playbook and start to ask questions about the dominant narrative that we experience. Part of creating a different world is understanding the world we live in right now. And so we're going to spend some time talking about how do we actually understand the reality in which we live, and it's only then can we start to dream differently. So it'll be interesting. We've got a lot of different voices that are going to speak into this, and I'm excited.
Awesome. So here's what we need from all of you. Regardless of whether you're new to Watershed, or just been tuning in the last year during the pandemic, or maybe you're a longtime Watershedder who has been keeping up with our Sunday morning service streams, or maybe you haven't, but regardless, this last year, 2020 into this new year, has been tumultuous in many ways, has kind of been an overturning of the world that was, and many of us are trying to rediscover what the world looks like now, maybe what it hopefully could be or should be in the future. Last year, we were privileged to hear from so many different voices during the pandemic, people that we were able to bring in to interview or dialogue with, many of whom have spent a ton of time thinking about what a different kind of world could or should look like. And we want to continue to learn and listen to those voices, but in many ways, we also need to be continuing to learn from and listen to you, Watershed. And so as we kick off this series this Sunday, what we would love any or all of you to do is to let us know, and there's going to be a form in the comments that you can fill this out. We would love to hear from you, and what could or would a different world look like to you or for you? What do you wish was possible, believe to be possible? Or maybe if you even haven't thought that far, what about this world needs to pass away? What needs to kind of go the way of the dinosaur, so to speak? What needs to go extinct so that something new can be born from the ashes? And so our plan for this series is every week, we will kind of reflect on, like I said, and go deeper into the talk from the Sunday prior, but we would love to weave kind of some responses from all of you into that. So please just take a couple minutes, fill out the form that's going to be linked to this video, so that we can know what you, Watershed, are hoping for, wishing for, imagining when it comes to a different world that may just be possible today.
Sounds great.
All right, see you soon.